Welcome to the latest stream courtesy of Seahawks Draft Blog. Good morning to those of you watching in Seattle at this hour of the day. I'm delighted to say we've been joined by the number one draft insider and analyst, a man who for me symbolizes the draft coverage along with the likes of Mel Kiper. It's been a privilege to speak to Tony Pauline for the last few years prior to the draft at about this time, and it's great to have him with us yet again here today. Tony, let's get straight into this. We're 2 weeks away now. It's so close. Are you hearing anything about how the Seahawks might approach this draft? Because it's pretty unique for them. They've only got 3 picks.
Well, first, let me say it's a pleasure to be back. I look forward to our once-a-year get-togethers. It's said it's only once a year. But, you know, with the Seahawks, you never really know. I mean, they go into every draft needing offensive linemen and needing defensive backs, and you hear about players that they like. And then they pull a rabbit out of the hat. They draft a player that you never thought they were going to select because they prefer player fits over best player available. So, you know, the obvious answer to your question is, yeah, they're going to look offensive lineman and cornerback. But history has shown, you know, the Seattle Seahawks do what the Seattle Seahawks want, and it's usually against conventional wisdom.
What do you make of the fact that they only have 3 picks, especially when this year, Tony, it feels like cheap talent is at a premium because the cap situation is what it is. Getting players on a rookie contract could be beneficial this year, maybe?
Well, it's beneficial any year. I mean, but I don't think that one year is different from the other. But, you know, what do I think about their approach with so few picks? When you trade away picks for the Jamal Adams and those types of players, there's a very thin margin of error. Because what happens is if you don't win and you don't win quickly, it really falls off a cliff because the Jamal Adams may be on the wrong side of their game a few years down the road. You may not want to re-sign Jamal Adams. You may not keep him. And not only do you lose Jamal Adams, but you don't have players to replace him or players to add to your depth chart because you gave those picks away to get Jamal Adams. New York Jets did that with Mike Tannenbaum and Rex Ryan. I mean, they traded away pick after pick to get Antonio Cromartie, to get Santonio Holmes, get Braylon Edwards. They traded up to get Mark Sanchez. They traded up to get the running back from Iowa, and they almost did it. I mean, they were half a yard away from going to the Super Bowl, but then when it stopped, when it ended and they weren't competitive anymore, it basically fell off the edge because the players that they traded for were old and past their prime, and they didn't have the selections or they didn't have the players to fill in because they had traded away all those picks. So the bottom line is this: they've got to hit on their selections and they got to win soon, because if they don't win soon, eventually this could all implode.
I want to ask you a bit about Jamal Adams in a little while, but recently you were on 710 ESPN and you relayed some information from a source that suggested maybe the Seahawks were as motivated to move on from their franchise quarterback as Russell Wilson was to move on from the Seattle Seahawks. It does seem now like they're going to give it another go in 2021. What do you make of this whole saga that emerged this offseason? Is there any updates, and could a divorce still potentially be on the cards, do you think, in a year's time?
Yeah, well, what I had originally reported was the Seahawks were very open to trading Russell Wilson. They were as apt to get rid of to move him as Russell Wilson was at the time, to move on. I said at the time, though, it wasn't going to happen this year because of the salary cap situation. We've got a lower cap. Russell Wilson has a high number, but there are people who were telling me that this could be the last year Russell Wilson plays in Seattle. Now, why is it happening? Well, it seems it's ironic, but you look at the situation in Detroit, you look at what the Rams did, you look at the Niners. It seems that even though the quarterback is the most important position, it's also sort of the most disposable position, whether it's Jared Goff, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo, you know, whomever. These teams that have invested high picks or a lot of picks in the case of Garoppolo seem to have no issue just discarding these quarterbacks. Russell Wilson's getting up there in age. I think there is a possibility that if it doesn't work out well in the field for Seattle this year, work out in the field, a division title, they go deep into the playoffs, that Russell Wilson could be traded in the offseason after 2020.
Now, you've already mentioned the offensive line as a likely target for the Seahawks, cornerback as well. I think a lot of fans are thinking because they haven't replaced some of their receivers that maybe at some point they will draft a receiver as well. I just wondered, in your opinion, Tony, for just looking at some of those positions, O-line, receiver, maybe cornerback as well, who are some of the guys that you like who might be available late second, early third round if they trade down? Who are some of the names that spring to mind for you?
Yeah, if you need a tight end, if you need an offensive tackle or receiver, this is the year that you can get a good one in the draft, really through the third and fourth round. I mean, late second round, as far as offensive tackles are concerned, you're talking about Brady Christensen, the left tackle from BYU, who did a great job protecting Zach Wilson this year, as well as in 2019. You're talking Walker Little out of Stanford, a guy who was highly rated after his sophomore season of 2018, hurt his knee the first game of 2019, did not play the rest of the year, decided to opt out this season after the Pac-12 kind of didn't know what they were doing early on. But still, you go back and you watch the 2017, 2018 film on Walker Little of Stanford. He looks like a top 15 pick. Potentially James Hudson of Cincinnati, a guy who very big, strong, nasty guy, played left tackle for Cincinnati. I think he projects to right tackle at the next level. Those are all really solid prospects who could quickly break into a starting lineup. As far as the receiver position, I think they'll have a good chance to get a good receiver. Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State, I think is going to be underdrafted. I think he's a top 45 talent who's probably not going to go until late second, early third day. Good route runner. I compare him to Brandon Ayuk, the former first-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers. Amon-Ra St. Brown of USC was terrific in 2019. A little bit disappointing last season, but you got to kind of write that off because of the year it was at the Pac-12. Didn't run all that well during his pro day, but he's a real good pass catcher. If they're looking for a bigger possession type of guy, maybe Nico Collins of Michigan, who will be there late second, may even be there in the third for them. So in the third round. It's a good year if you need a tackle or a receiver to get one in the draft. Cornerback, not so much. I mean, they like the bigger cornerbacks. Paulson Adebo of Stanford, I think, will be there in the third round. Cameron Bynum of Cal is a guy who I like. Both are bigger corners. Both are tough, physical guys who got a lot going on between the ears, very instinctive. Adebo's been more up and down throughout his career. He opted out in 2020. Cameron Bynum of Cal has been a terrific player. There were questions about his deep speed. Kind of answered them at the Senior Bowl, then ran 4.50 at his pro day. So I think that eased a lot of concerns about his game.
2 weeks, as I mentioned, until this thing starts. When the first round is complete in 2 weeks' time, Tony, what do you think are going to be the big topics? What are we all going to be talking about after that first frame is complete?
Probably be talking about how there were 5 quarterbacks squeezed into the top 12, maybe top 10 picks, when really it's further proof how quarterbacks are overdrafted. If the Niners do, in fact, take Mac Jones, which I think would be a reach, that's going to be a massive story. How Mac Jones, a guy who was considered a mid-round pick, basically worked his way into the top 3. I'm not sold at this point in time that Mac Jones is a given to the San Francisco 49ers. I think the quarterbacks, because of the position, because of the emphasis on the first round, and because there's going to be so many of them going early in the draft, that's going to be the big story.
What is the buzz surrounding the quarterbacks in general? And look, the Seahawks, we just don't know. Given what's happening with Russell Wilson, later on they may think we need to take somebody just as even just a flyer to see if there's somebody that we can develop there for next year. Is there a guy who might be available beyond the first round, maybe even the second round, who is worth keeping an eye on, Tony?
After your first 2 rounds, you got your top 5 guys: Trevor Lawrence, Zach of Clemson, Zach Wilson, BYU, Justin Fields, Ohio State, Trey Lance, North Dakota State, Mac Jones, Alabama. Then you got your next group, which includes Kellen Mond of Texas A&M, Kyle Trask of Florida, Davis Mills, who's moving upwards from Stanford. There's a big drop-off. As far as the Seahawks are concerned, Jamie Newman, the former Wake Forest quarterback who initially transferred to Georgia this year, never played it down for Georgia. He's a big, strong, mobile guy, showed flashes of brilliance or flashes of ability. I don't want to say flashes of brilliance, flashes of ability during the Senior Bowl. He's a big athletic guy that I think is going to be a terrific developmental prospect. You're looking maybe 6th round for him. Ian Book of Notre Dame, not the biggest guy in the world, doesn't have the strongest arm, but is a mobile RPO type quarterback who's got a lot going on between the ears. So I think either Jamie Newman or Ian Book are two guys that in the later rounds are somebody or two passers that they could look to for future development. And they may just be good guys to have on the depth chart as your number 2 quarterback.
How cautious do you think teams should be? And I ask this, Tony, because quite a few people at the moment who are Seahawks fans are talking about Darrell Taylor, because the Seahawks have signed Aldon Smith today. And there's a feeling that there's at least a possibility that the Seahawks will never have Darrell Taylor. And they traded up to go and get him last year. They spent 2 high picks on him in a COVID impacted draft without perhaps all of the information that you usually get. He had some red flags because of the injuries going into that draft, and he may never play. Do teams need to be very wary of that again this year? And how would you sort of advise approaching it that way?
Well, they need to, they need to be wary of it every single year. I think with Darrell Taylor was a guy who was highly rated, insanely highly rated as far as I was concerned, because he was such a good athlete, great size and speed, a guy who flashed ability, but he was never someone that was consistently productive on the field for Tennessee. When you were drafting Taylor before the injuries, it was a situation where the reputation did not meet the reality. It was going to be a long haul for them. So, what you're saying makes sense. It's going to be like that every year. I think what's happening this year is, considering the fact that there were only 150 guys invited to Indianapolis for the combine medicals, and that there were no pro day workouts and no official team visits where teams can do additional examinations. And you had basically 150 guys that were going to receive combine medicals. In fact, some of them, didn't go. Jalen Phillips, a potential first-round pick, did not go because he was still in COVID quarantine. That means basically there's going to be 100 or more guys, or I should say more than 100 guys, that are going to be drafted that never received physical exams by NFL teams. So, yeah, you're going to have to tread carefully. The guys that you weren't able to get examination information on, you're going to have to go back and look at their college medical records, get as much information from the colleges on their medical history that you can. Talk to the college coaches, see if these guys were constantly injured. Were they able to practice during the week, or were they sitting on the sidelines because of injuries? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. The unknown will kill any draft prospect. It will make a guy fall down boards faster than anything else. And there's a lot of unknowns this year because of what's going on with COVID.
Tony, you know the Jets as well as anybody. I have actually been to a Jets game. I went there with my wife in 2008. Brett Favre was the quarterback. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs, had a fantastic day. I would love to get back to New York when this pandemic is done and go and see a game in the new stadium, because it was still the old stadium when we went over. I just wonder, how do you feel about the Jets going into this draft? Because it feels like it's the latest opportunity for the Jets to reshape themselves and take a step forward. But we have been here before. So how do you feel about the Jets going into this draft?
Well, first, let me say, as someone who's a Jets season ticket holder and had been to every Jets home game for 40 years until last season, if you and your wife come out, make sure you give me a call. We'll tailgate beforehand, but I'll let you know the older stadium was a lot nicer than the newer stadium. The newer stadium is a disaster. As far as the Jets are concerned, I'm going to look at it as it's more of the same until they prove otherwise. I mean, you got a new regime there, a new coaching staff, obviously a newer general manager. They're likely going to be starting over, or they're going to be starting over with a new quarterback, Zach Wilson of BYU. It all looks good on paper. I mean, the feeling towards Robert Saleh is positive in and out of the league. I talked to people at the Senior Bowl about him. They thought it was a great fit. You got Mike LaFleur as the offensive coordinator. Joe Douglas has done a solid job, solid to very good job with his draft picks. The free agency moves have been a little up and down. Doesn't seem to want to give that big contract away to the star player. The bottom line is this. You go back to the Jets 30 plus years, oftentimes it looks really good on paper, but it's never able to transition onto the football field the way the Seattle Seahawks do. So, there's good feelings surrounding the Jets, understandably so. But until that, transitions or equates to wins and losses, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to take a wait and see approach.
I remember watching the 2018 draft, and it's possibly my favorite draft, Tony, because I was in Florida when it was happening. So I mean, then I could actually watch it as at a reasonable hour, as opposed to staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning here in the UK to watch it. And I remember that Darnold pick because it kind of emerged right before the draft that it was going to be Baker Mayfield first, and then you think, well, Darnold's going to get to number 3, and you see it and you think, this is the moment. This could be the thing that really launches this team forward. What prevents that happening so often with franchises like the Jets?
Coaching. I mean, it's plain and simple. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the question was, who is Cleveland going to – the Jets had made that trade, I believe, right after the combine with the Colts to go from the 6th pick to the 3rd pick to ensure themselves a quarterback. The question was, who is Cleveland going to take with the 1st pick, and were the Giants going to take a quarterback with the 2nd pick? And it fell the Jets' way. Cleveland took Baker Mayfield. The Giants took Saquon Barkley. Lo and behold, Sam Darnold falls into the Jets' laps. But I think what we've seen with Sam Darnold is probably my biggest pet peeve with the draft. People seem to forget the draft is not the end. The draft is just the beginning. After draft weekend, people are talking about who won the draft, what teams did the best. This guy had 28 of 32 in his first round mock. This guy had 90 picks had 90 players in the top 100 chosen. Big deal. I mean, it's all on paper. You got to transition what's on paper into production on the football field. That's what didn't happen with Darnold. Darnold showed some flashes of brilliance his rookie year, especially at the end of the rookie year. All of a sudden, in comes Adam Gase, who is probably one of the, as far as Jets history is concerned, the worst head coach after Rich Kotite. And what happened was Sam Darnold's career went straight downhill because Adam Gase could not develop a quarterback. He's never been able to develop a quarterback. Look at Ryan Tannehill, what happened after he escaped the clutches of Adam Gase, how well he's done. And it was just one disaster after another. It wasn't all Adam Gase because Sam Darnold never showed any ability himself to develop. Sam Darnold was the quarterback out there throwing into double and triple coverage. But so much of it is coaching and player development, and also the player himself. So I think it was the perfect storm of failure for a quarterback with the New York Jets, which we've seen time and time again. I mean, the Jets have had some good quarterbacks in the past. Ken O'Brien, Chad Pennington, Mark Sanchez. And the history of the New York Jets with the quarterbacks is they can only get them to a certain point, but they can't get them over the hump. You look at what Seattle's done with Russell Wilson. You look what Seattle's done with guys that weren't even highly rated or guys that fell through the draft and the way they're able to develop them. DK Metcalf, perfect example. Tyler Lockett, another perfect example. So much of it is not just drafting the right player, but developing that player.
How would you assess the Jamal Adams trade from a Jets and a Seahawks perspective a few months on? It feels like longer than that, but it is just a few months since that trade was done.
I think from the Seattle point of view, is a terrific fit. I mean, he's basically perfect for what they would like to do with their safeties. He's not a great rangy free safety, but he's a fierce downhill safety who's a terrific run defender, who shows good ball skills between the numbers. Not a guy that you want to place over the slot receiver. He's had some injury issues the past couple of years, which may raise some red flags. So I think from the Jets' point of view, I mean, they had a situation. It was a relationship that was untenable. You could not bring Jamal Adams back, especially what went on basically from, I want to say, November of 2019 up through the summer of 2020. They had to get rid of him. So I think it's a situation where if Jamal Adams is able to stay healthy and play to the level that he's capable, it's a win-win for both teams. Now, obviously, I go back to what I said. The Jets got all those picks for Jamal Adams. Let's see how they use those picks. Let's see the players that they select with those picks. And more importantly, let's see if those players that they use, that they select with those picks, pan out on the football field.
You were tweeting from a Mets game recently, Tony. I'm very jealous. We were talking about this briefly before we started. Live sport still isn't an option in the UK. We're probably going to have to wait till next season, which is August, September, before any of us can do that. What was it like going back to something I guess we all kind of took for granted a little bit before it was taken away from us over a year ago? What was it like being back there?
Oh, it was incredible. I'm not a huge baseball fan. I just like going to Met games at Citi Field. It's relaxing. I'm going to deal with aggravation, root for the Mets. It's just a fun. It was a godsend. I mean, it was like a slice of heaven. I wasn't able to sit in my regular seats, even I'm a 20-game season ticket holder. But just being out there, having a few beers, watching them play baseball was fantastic, as was Senior Bowl practices. I got to tell you, it wasn't a live game, the Senior Bowl practice, but Senior Bowl practice was the first time I had been to any sort of live sporting event in more than a year. The last time I actually saw football or pads popping in real time was the Senior Bowl of 2020. So once I arrived at Senior Bowl practice, that was also another godsend because, one, I go there every year. Two, the first practice was almost rained out. And three, just to be back there and say, thank God. But yeah, the Mets game the other night, it's great you bring it up, was absolutely fantastic. The only thing is, it's kind of a bummer, and I don't want to be picky. They don't sell peanuts at the stadium because I guess they say if you open up the peanuts with your hand and then you throw the shells on them, you could spread COVID, which I don't know. In order to get into the stadium, you had to show that you had either been vaccinated or that you had it tested negative for COVID, but we can't eat peanuts. So I'll take what I can get at this point.
The world we live in today. Just to finish off, there's a couple of other things. Justin's got in touch and said that you interviewed D. Eskridge recently, and he just wonders kind of where you think he goes and what you think about him.
I tell you, the interview we did with Dwayne Eskridge was terrific. He is a very confident guy. He's a good athlete. He spoke with us. He's as confident in his abilities to play in the defensive secondary as he is at receiver, because at one point in time during his Western Michigan career, as we brought up during his interview, he was actually a cornerback. He's a great athlete. He's explosive. He's got a lot of confidence in himself. He's got a high upside. The problem with him is he's a little bit small, under 5'10", not the biggest frame. I think with his speed, he's going to go in the late second round. It was ironic. He was a sprinter in high school, as you would imagine. He ran a 4.37 during his pro day, and he said he was disappointed. He should have run a lot faster. He told us that he kind of came up too high out of his start. He didn't use a good angle, and he probably lost about 1/10 of a second there. So very impressed with his confidence, and he knows where he's at. I think he can go late second round. I don't think he gets out of the top 12 picks of round 3.
And Robbie says that he agrees on MetLife not being he says it's not his favourite stadium. He says he was there for Super Bowl 48, which is otherwise a great day for Seahawks fans. But he says it took forever to leave the stadium and they ran out of beer at halftime.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I drink my beer in the parking lot beforehand. I'm not going to pay $14 a beer when I can basically bring 2 6-packs or buy a 12-pack of my favorite beer for $14. But yeah, I mean, it's a disaster getting into the stadium and getting out of the stadium. Not just the parking lot, but getting into the stadium itself. It is the stadium. MetLife is as fan unfriendly as you could imagine. If I was going to use one word to describe it, the word would either be hassle or inconvenient. And I have been to, up until last year when they weren't allowing fans in the stands in New Jersey, I had been to like 312 consecutive Jet games. So, I've been there and I've experienced it. But yeah, that stadium it's not very friendly for fans. Your viewer is right on.
Yeah, Robbie says he may have just drunk all of the beer because the Seahawks were leading so handsomely at halftime.
It was a little bit. It was also a little bit chilly for a Super Bowl because it was outdoors. It wasn't cold, but it was a little bit chilly that day. It
was certainly more enjoyable than the following Super Bowl, I'll say that, from a Seahawks point of view. Big thank you to the play call on that. Look, Tony, it's great to speak to you every year. You always provide so much great information, and congrats on your work. The show with Trey Wingo was superb. another fantastic year with Pro Football Network. What can we look forward to in the next couple of weeks as we build up towards this draft?
We got a free draft guide, which will be unveiled on Friday, April 16th. All you got to do is go and sign up with your email, and you can download the draft guide. The draft guide will have rankings of over 850 players. It will have 300 scouting reports. It will have a forward written by Trey Wingo. Obviously, when all is said and done, we're going to have just under 700 individual scouting reports. So not only are you going to be able to find information on the 3 guys the Seahawks eventually draft if they don't trade picks, but you'll be able to get information on the 12 or 13 guys they sign after the draft. And of course, we hope to have all the breaking news as far as what teams may do on draft weekend or which way they are leaning.
Yeah, check out the simulator as well on the website. I think a lot of us were addicted to that a year ago when the Seahawks had a first-round pick in 2 seconds. When there's only 3 picks, it's not quite as fun seeing all those guys go off the board before 56. But still, it's a lot of fun. Go and check that out. And listen, if you're not following Tony on Twitter, you're missing out. At Tony Pauline, watch the show with Trey Wingo. All of his stuff is absolutely golden. Whether it's the start of the summer, Tony, when you just start to give us a few bits of info on who we should be watching in the upcoming college football season. And hopefully we're going to have a full schedule of college football games this year, right through to all of the information you provide during the season, right through to draft time at April, whether it's the Senior Bowl, the Pro Day stuff. For those of us who are obsessed about the draft, it is priceless, the information that you provide. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. And a big thanks to everybody who's been watching along. Check out Seahawks Draft Blog for more analysis. There's actually a 7,000-word Seahawks Draft preview available to check out. And I wrote that despite the letter E on my MacBook not working properly. So as you can imagine, people like D. Eskridge, you have to retype their name quite a lot with no E. Lots more analysis on there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel too. Like the video, and we'll see you next time.